Welcome. I am your host, Woodrow Wilson. You may remember me as being your 28th president, or the founder of the 14 points, which were so necessary at the Paris Peace Conference. Today I am privileged to tell you the story. I think I will select an old favorite from the time that I was president. Ah yes, the story of Grigori Rasputin. The story ends in 1916. Russia was indeed going through a hard time. You see, the Russian royal family, the Romanovs, they were in trouble. Tsar Nicholas II had married an unpopular German princess, which didn't put him in favor with the Russian people. On top of that, his youngest, Alexei, the royal heir to the throne, had a secret condition. Medically, the boy was going through agonizing pain. It was a condition called hemophilia, and unfortunately, there was nothing much the doctors could do for him. But then, the Tsar and his wife, the Tsarina, heard about a faith healer named Grigori Rasputin, known in the wilds of Russia as the Mad Monk. Many of the Tsarina's rich Russian friends had gotten to know this Grigori Rasputin. He was known, believe it or not, as quite the ladies' man about Russia, and was known for his eccentric ways. The Tsarina immediately called him up to the palace and had him look over her sickly son, Alexei. And wouldn't you know it, somehow, although we don't know exactly why, he was able to heal Alexei for the time being. The Queen believed it was some sort of mysticism, although some here in America believe it may have been hypnotism. Whatever the case was, assuredly the Tsarina would never let this faith healer out of her son's sight. The condition of hemophilia is such that whenever you start bleeding, you can't stop. So you're constantly in danger for your life anytime you make a cut or scrape your knee. Rasputin was an odd duck. He believed eccentric, crazy religious practices. He had these eyes that seemed to burn holes into your soul. He was a creepy fellow. And he was also uneducated, kept long nails, never cut his beard, hardly washed. And especially when World War I began and the Tsar left for the front to go fight against the Germans, the Tsarina was left in charge of her household and the palace at St. Petersburg and of ruling over the entirety of Russia. She kept Grigori Rasputin close, not only as a faith healer, but also as a wise counselor to her, appointing many priests in positions of power who were friends of Grigori Rasputin. And this did not sit well with the royal people of Russia, the leaders, the princes, the generals, those who had high office. For an illiterate, scandalous, creepy monk to have the ear of the royal family of Russia not only makes Russia look bad, but may prompt the Tsarina to make poor choices for Russia's future. It was decided that Rasputin had to go. But that was easier said than done. A decade before, a poor Russian peasant woman had stabbed Rasputin, believing she had killed him, but she hadn't. He bounced back, seemingly miraculously. There were other assassination attempts. None of them succeeded. There was a belief that Rasputin somehow shrugged off death as easily as you and I a coat or a hat. But four men decided to put this to a test. They were Tsar Nicholas II's royal cousin, Prince Yusupov, a chief of police, a doctor, and the four of them met to decide exactly how they would end Grigori Rasputin's life. It was on a wintry day in 1916 when their attempt was carried out. Prince Yusupov, the leader of this conspiracy, had recently married a beautiful Russian princess, and beautiful women never escaped Grigori Rasputin's eye. And so Yusupov invited him into his royal palace, welcoming him to meet his beautiful bride. Rasputin couldn't turn the offer down. And as Rasputin came to the door and was welcomed down to the basement of Prince Yusupov's palatial estate, Yusupov entertained him by playing his musical instrument, offering him some cookies and some wine that he gave to guests. Little did Rasputin know, but the cookies were laced with powerful poisons, and the wine as well, such that after eating one or two or drinking a few sips, Rasputin would be killed. Unfortunately for Yusupov, both the cookies and the wine Rasputin refused, saying he was not hungry or thirsty. And so Yusupov continued to play his musical instrument until finally offering Rasputin the excuse of, I'm not sure what's taking my wife so long, let me go upstairs and find out. This was a lie. Prince Yusupov's wife was already sent outside of the city to visit a friend of hers. Prince Yusupov instead went upstairs to find his co-conspirators and to share with them his frustration. I can't get him to eat anything. He won't take the poison. To which his friends said, here, take this revolver and shoot him. So Prince Yusupov tucked it behind in his back belt, walked downstairs, and as he reached the lowest step, what did he find but Grigori Rasputin eating the cookies and drinking some wine. So Yusupov sat down, convinced that this would do the job, and began playing his music, offering the excuse that his wife was just taking a while. You know how women are, he said. And as he played, he noticed Rasputin, who sat down listening to the music, started to clutch at his stomach, a worried expression on Rasputin's face. Yusupov knew the poison was taking effect. He asked Rasputin, are you feeling well? And Rasputin, holding his stomach, told him, I was feeling rather sick, but now I'm doing better. And as Yusupov played, Rasputin lost all look as if he were poisoned and continued to look his normal self. Yusupov knew what he had eaten and drank should have killed a normal man. So after a good time later, Yusupov went back upstairs, telling his teammates, I don't know what happened. He ate the cookies, he drank the wine, and he looks just fine. They asked him, do you still have the revolver? Yusupov said, oh, yes, of course. So Yusupov went downstairs again, and this time seeing Rasputin, who had his back turned to him, looking at some artwork on the wall. Yusupov mentioned something like, you should say your prayers. They're the last ones you'll ever make. And as Rasputin turned around, Yusupov, trembling, pulled out his revolver and fired the bullet into Rasputin's chest. Rasputin fell to the ground and lay still. Yusupov saw the blood flow out from beneath Rasputin and, shaking his hand crazily, went back up the stairs to tell his friends what he had done. He had brought with him some wine, and his nerves were so undone that he started to drink from the wine. His friends knocked it out of his hands, reminding him that this was the same wine that had poisoned Rasputin, or failed to do so. His friends went to go get a sack, a bag, some chains, rope, anything to be able to hide the body of Rasputin now that the deed was carried out. And Yusupov went downstairs to bring the body up to the first floor. Yusupov got to the bottom of these stairs, and as he was watching the body of Grigori Rasputin, he noticed something. The body wasn't quite where he had left it, off to the side perhaps. And as he bent down and looked on the floor level at Rasputin's face, Rasputin's eyes suddenly opened up, and Rasputin jumped to his feet, pushing past Yusupov and rushing up the stairs, blood streaming out of his chest. The co-conspirators who were there at the top of the stairs, hearing this noise coming up, were startled as Rasputin burst out from all of them, pushing them aside, going through the French doors and out into the snow of the backyard of Yusupov's palace. Yusupov ran up the stairs, frightened as can be, and his co-conspirators, likewise, not expecting this at all, ran out after Rasputin into the snow. Rasputin ran toward the fence, the wall, and began to climb up it in order to get over it and out into the snowy area beyond where he might find civilization, help. But this was not to be. The doctor of the group had grabbed the revolver from Yusupov and had fired it several times at Rasputin, but his aim was so off because of their nervousness that it didn't work, so biting his own hand to steady his fingers, he fired a third time, and this time it struck Rasputin in the back, who let go and fell into the blood-soaked snow. The other men reached the body and began to beat it senseless. Finally, now convinced that he was dead, they went to grab the materials they needed to bury his body, shovels, chains, anything to hide what they had done, for they knew that the Tsar and the Tsarina would be fiercely looking for this man who had the power they believed to heal their son. They could see a police officer walking toward the palace, hearing the shots that were fired. The police chief rushed off to talk to that police officer, telling him to mind his own business and go back home, which he did. When they got back after grabbing the supplies, they found Rasputin still alive and crawling away from the scene where he had been beaten, moving through the snow with arms dragging the rest of his body, not yet dead. The men fell upon him once again, and this time, beating him senseless, one drove a knife through his chest, at which point Rasputin stopped moving, finally. They were more than a little frightened as to how this night had gone, not at all how they expected. And so they took Rasputin's dead body. They wrapped chains around his arms, his legs. They stuffed him inside of a sack, and they brought him beyond the palace to the place where a river would hide a body perfectly. Climbing up onto a bridge, they could drop the body down through a hole in this river, and his body, tied down with stones, would forevermore rest at the bottom of this frozen waterway. And that is what they did, seeing his body sink beneath the water. The co-conspirators looked at each other that night, saying, "Well, that was much more difficult than we thought it would be." As one can expect, the Tsarina was frantic when Rasputin did not report back to the palace that next day. She sent out hundreds of people looking for Rasputin's body, but it was not to be found. Not until 3 days later. The police officer who was interviewed told them about the shots fired, and the police chief who had told him to mind his own business. And by interviewing each of these men who were taken into custody, it was found out very quickly. The men did not deny what they had done. They thought they were doing the right thing and that Rasputin needed to die. And so the story came out, and divers went down into the cold river, fishing out Rasputin's body. And that is where the story takes an even deeper turn. For what was reported was that they found a bag at the bottom of the river, weighed down with stones with a large hole in it, and chains that had come loose from whoever they had been holding on to. There was no body inside that bag. But the story doesn't end there, because what human weapons failed to achieve, nature did for them. The body of Rasputin was found. It was further down the river, frozen, stabbed, shot, beaten, poisoned, but frozen by the temperature of the river. Rasputin's dead body was found, taken to an autopsy, and investigated. That is the account of one die-hard Russian mad monk who goes down in history as one of the hardest cases to kill. One more historical note, though. Rasputin had written in a letter in 1916 telling the Tsar and his family, "You'd best protect me, for the moment at which my life is over, your children will not live 2 years beyond that." Sure enough, the royal family, the Romanovs, failed to live past the Russian Revolution, as we will hear about tomorrow.